Welcome to Conflict Wise. Conflict is often seen as a problem that's best avoided or resolved. But what if conflict is really a hidden opportunity?
A hidden opportunity for change that is lost if we rush to release the tension it brings. Not only the tension between us, but also the tension within.
Yes, in Conflict Wise, we tackle typical situations and share practical ways to use conflict for change.
Have you ever thought this calls for revenge? Maybe your partner has cheated on you. Maybe your business partner has swindled some money from you. Somebody has done something to you and you want to get back at them.
Vi, it's just such a normal part of life and relationships, right? Just that there are times when I feel that I need to seek some kind of retribution, some kind of revenge for something that's happened to me. So it's something that I feel hurt about.
Yeah, because you've been wronged and everything inside you screams for that to be righted. I think revenge is often preceded by anger. And, like that's the thing that motivates you. But now it gets tricky because what's at the core of anger? And at the core of anger is also injustice. But you can actually use the anger to, like, if you're just thinking about the anger and you want to be spiteful, then what you're thinking about is, how do I get that? What am I going to do so that the other person will suffer? And that ends up being what you ruminate on back and forth. Or you could go to, yes, I feel anger, and use that anger to propel you to take some action. That would be maybe having to do more with punishment. It's like, this person did something to me and I have to ensure that it's not going to happen again. So in a sense, it's kind of like a backwards way of bringing about some social justice.
I mean, Vi, that's really important, right? Because often we just, revenge in some ways gets a bad tag, right? But in fact, it's the basis for our justice systems, because in some ways, justice, with its forms of holding people to account for their behavior, is a way of a socially accepted form of revenge, if you think of it. But it's not me taking it, it's us agreeing jointly through a justice system as to what is right and what's the consequences of our behavior when I do something incorrectly. So yeah, so that link between justice and our justice systems and revenge is actually quite an important link. It's not always there, right? So in some situations, it implies that I actually trust the justice system. So in contexts where people don't trust it, so in countries where that's the case, or we see it often in the Western world where gangs and gang behavior, we see the consequence of gang behavior on our streets, where people will take revenge, often in the form of killing the members of the opposite gang. And in part, that's because that system doesn't trust the bigger system, in fact, but have created their own way of trying to balance out. Of course, it's got consequences.
Yeah. I mean, so there's this dilemma around trust, because it's almost like inbred within us that we have a sense that the right has to be wrong, that the wrong has to be righted.
But just go back. You said there's always a dilemma around trust. So I just want to go back to that point, right? You meant to say there's always a dilemma around revenge.
Right, so yes.
So we're just going to go back to where Vi starts. There's always a dilemma. Okay, so
yeah.
Just go there.
So there's always this dilemma around revenge, because within our systems, like even animals want revenge. We have a sense that if we have been wronged, we need to have that righted. And yet, we're not always right in the way that we call it either. Our perceptions might not be right on. And how do we go about making a right wrong? How do we even go about making a wrong right? It's not so easy. And if you don't take some sort of revenge, even all of society begins to disintegrate.
So interesting, right? So in some ways, revenge is a way of where we are naturally built into us, even in very primitive societies back in time, of a way of balancing out the cost or to hold people to account. But there's an interesting paradox around revenge, because we almost think that if I can get revenge for injustice or my hurt, then in fact it'll be done. So there's almost like a cathartic, if I can get. Yet the research and experience shows opposite. In fact, if I go and seek revenge, potentially I'm more likely to damage myself as much as the other in that context. And why is that the case? Why would that be the case that in this context?
Rumination is such a powerful thing. Like, think about if you're thinking about that all the time, and it's subtle, because in some ways it feels devilishly sweet, but it's mouth-puckering sour. Your face even begins to take on the etching of it, and you can spend years and years trying to get back at somebody.
Absolutely right. So that's what we want to do. So the question is, how do we manage this, right? I mean, what do we do to when we're faced with this sense of I need to get revenge? What do we do with that? Because it's not like something. It's not wrong that we feel that. It's a very normal, natural human being feeling that if there's a form of injustice, I want to correct that in some form. And that, as we were saying a bit earlier, it balances our society as well. But how do we manage this from a very personal point of view, right? What are some of the key things we need to do as individuals when we are faced with this sense, I need to seek revenge?
Well, and I think that's it. The first thing is to go personal, go inside and actually look and see what was the wrong that was done to me. And you have to acknowledge it, because you can't dismiss it. So it really is admitting it. I mean, that would be the first part.
The first step, yeah, and because that step of just going and acknowledging it is a way of settling it, right? I mean, part of what's out there is people say, revenge should be served as a cold meal, because what that does, it actually makes me stop for a moment. It shifts my thinking, which has gone back when I'm back to my amygdala, forward to my neocortex, as part of my brain, my frontal cortex, which it actually will get me to think more differently. So the second step, that step of going in, actually settles me, strangely enough. It actually, okay, so this is me, this is what's happened. Step two is actually to step back and weigh up the possibilities, weigh up the cost.
Yeah, to weigh the cost, that if you continue to make that your focus and your raison d'etre, what impact is that going to have over you over an extended period of time? And then I think it takes us to a third step, which is you have to think about that and actually make a choice about what you're going to do with that injustice. And this is where it actually calls for us to be smart and think through what it's going to do to us if we continue on this path of wanting to get the other person, wanting to make the other person suffer. I think there's a difference between what do we do to make sure that the wrong stops versus making the other person suffer. Because that does something about raising the dark part of us, and it runs amok. It goes out of control.
So it is what Vi's saying about this third step is really important, because firstly, let's go back. Then we're going to go inside, accept it. We're then going to step back and evaluate it. The third step, what Vi is saying, is we need to make a choice. If I don't make a choice, I need to make a choice as to whether I'm going to seek revenge, or am I going to let it go in some form? That choice is critical, because if I don't choose, I will tend to go on the track of ruminating, and I'll tend to go on the revenge track. So there's actually a discerned point, and that's the key thing around these three steps. By the third step, I need to choose, right? And look, you might, let's be honest about these situations, we might get to a point where you think, I don't know if I made the right choice, because you are ruminating on it, and you're thinking, no, I need to seek revenge again. And then you're back into the cycle of go inside, step back, and make a choice again. So it's the idea that this doesn't go away with one single choice. It's a process. It's because every time I think about it or something triggers it for me in my environment, I'm going to possibly get back into that cycle of what am I going to do about this?
So maybe what's a takeaway out of all of this? And what you don't want to do is let the other person be in control of what you're going to do. You are still in control of the response that you take, regardless of what the other person has done, because you have to think about your own quality of life.
So true, right? Because what I do in the revenge track, I'm actually handing over control to the other person. So in some ways, I'm taking on their problems and carrying them around on my own shoulders, rather than making a decision as to what is mine to own, what can I learn from this, and what is mine to disown. It's theirs. It's impacted me, sure. So I'm not disowning that. It's impacted me. But in terms of going forward, do I carry their failure to deal with this or to acknowledge or accept the consequences of the behavior? Or do I choose to hold my own, let that go so that I'm not caught up in it in our future?
So we think about where we started with all the wrongs that were committed against you, your business partner doing you bad, somebody else hurting you. And in the end, you make a decision about that's who they are and this is who I am. So even in the light of all the stuff that has happened to you, who are you going to be? And that's where you have control. So don't give that power away.
I'm John Radford, and together with Viola Neufeld, we'd like to thank you for being part of our quest to help people use their conflict for constructive change. If you found this video useful, please subscribe to our Conflict Wise channel and share your opinion in the comments section and tell us what you think about This Calls for Revenge.